Okay, start recording. Okay. Hi everyone, and welcome again to my audiovisual channel. My name is Gabriela Handal. I'm a draftsman and your host for episode 136 of A Conversation About Art with artist Steve Chmilar. You're going to have to tell me how to pronounce that. If you want to support the show, please check the video description. Steve, please introduce yourself and tell our future listeners and viewers who you are and what you do and how to pronounce your last name.
My last name is pronounced Chmilar.
Chmilar.
That's how my family pronounces it, but
Yes.
It's again one of those European names. It was a Ukrainian name that was changed over time, and so that's how my family pronounces it. It sounds like it would have an S at the front or SCH. So people always try to spell it that way, or they say Chmilar, something like that. But it's Chmilar. So yeah,
Chmilar.
Sounds like the farce of like Miller Schmiller. Yeah, Steve Chmilar.
Right.
I live in on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Canada, and I am a painter who tries to do something different. I highly respect the traditional academic techniques, but I also really respect the kind of open-ended creativity of the new contemporary art world, whatever that means, whatever that term means, of new surrealism, these different genres, and combining them and merging them. In a nutshell.
Okay. Why did you do the finger quotes for that? What does it mean? What do those things mean?
Well, that's just a term that I heard floating around. Probably first time I heard it, I think, was 2014, 2015. New Contemporary, which is obviously a silly title. New, like new current, whatever that, like, and I know the art world has always had struggles, and every individual artist always has struggles with these statements and these terms, and how to define something that's usually kind of undefinable. So that's why I put it in air quotes. Another term, I guess, is new surrealism. Basically, a lot of the work that's associated with the LA galleries, sometimes Juxtapose Magazine or High Fructose, Beautiful Bazaar, those kinds of publications. Highly skill-based work, but it's generally in the vein of imaginative. So it's imaginative realism. You're not getting the effects of light that a lot of the traditional artists are looking for. It's, I think, really the Northern European tradition, where a lot of artists are really kind of just like taking tiny brushes and going like that for hours and hours without getting the effects of, say, like a Sargent approach, where it can be a lot quicker and very painterly, and you see all the big brushwork up close, but from a distance, they might achieve light effects more accurately in some ways because they're always copying from life as much as possible. Whereas the imaginative realists are trying to make something in their mind look kind of realistic. That's like a huge fork in the road right from the beginning of that whole thing in terms of how those things differ. But I'm very interested in the combination of those two things. So, yeah.
Okay. So then, I mean, are you referring to kind of like subject matter in terms of kind of like naming the genre of stuff that you like to depict?
I guess all of this work could be generally categorized as realism, or even more general than that in the scope of the entire art world. I guess it would be representational, right? So if we're representing something that people will recognize through their, main visual sense, of course. And then the category there would be realism, which of course has so many different worlds within it. The traditional realism world, always working from life. Illustrative, the illustrators, comic book artists, all those people whom I have a huge respect for. And the imaginative realists, who are often not achieving as high degree of realism as the traditional realists or photorealists, but are, in my opinion, sort of like within this subject matter scope that is unlimited. It's really like anything you can imagine or think of, you can paint. So I don't know if that clarifies things or not.
Sure. With the specific thing that you mentioned about lighting, it made me think of kind of like the Flemish painters, where or like maybe, I mean, I don't remember if Bruegel is considered Flemish, one of the Flemish people, but
Mhm.
like
Yeah,
that sort of guy, like like the Ghent ultrapiece, where there is obviously a light source somewhere, but it's not kind of like if you have your still life with the obvious light source. There is a light source somewhere, but it's kind of like a diffused, cloudy day sort of light.
yeah.
Does that sound about right? I mean, in terms of what you were talking about, would you say?
Yes, I would say. I mean, I think it's all over the map. I think a lot of artists have to be defined individually in some ways because every single artist that you can name is going to be somewhere different on that spectrum. So
Sure.
we might say, like, on the one far side, you have photorealistic traditional art, whether that's from life or from a photograph, and it looks as realistic as you can imagine. And then on the far end of that, of course, you would have maybe like some of the contemporary art that is figurative, but it doesn't look at all realistic, and it's not supposed to. Could be done very quickly, very large, messy brush marks. Even say like the Scream, uh, a painting like is that Munch,
Mm-hmm.
Edvard Munch,
Yeah.
if that's how his name is pronounced, but something like that. That's like it's a person, there's a character there, but it's not at all supposed to be real. So those are two maybe like the main ends of the spectrum that I'm thinking of at the top of my head. And I fall somewhere like here where I'm a little bit closer to the very realistic, but that's not supposed to be. It's not the point of my work. It's like the just the result, I guess you could say, in conveying a story, an allegory of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what medium? I don't remember if you said that just now. What medium do you use for your work?
Oil paint, and I do a lot of graphite drawings as well.
Okay.
Graphite with chalk, so it's mainly oil paint.
Um. So wouldn't you say that every image is narrative by default?
Yes.
Because I've heard, okay, so you already agree with me. Well, good. Because there's of course the, I think it's called narrative painting. I think it's called narrative painting. And that always seems a little bit absurd to me, because if a person paints a representationally, like just like you said just now, that it's, you depict an image that can be recognized because it's referencing something from the real world, from reality, then it is by default a narrative, because we don't, a human doesn't need very much to start making a story. Even if it's only a painting of a pen, is like, oh, I wonder how the pen got there, I wonder if it's been used, I wonder if it's for writing, I wonder, I mean, whatever,
Mhm.
like an image summons all kinds of questions and stories, or a little story or whatever. So I mean, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that. I think it depends whether we're speaking philosophically, which I'm not um, capable of doing in an academic sense. I have an interest in philosophy. At best, I would be an amateur dabbler. But in the colloquial sense, the way that most people would understand that are not interested in philosophy or even art, they might say that a narrative painting is one that is including multiple figures, and they're like the Dutch genre paintings or something, right? Where you have somebody at a table and somebody's looking at something, and then someone walks through the door and something's happening. It's like a screenshot of an episode from a sitcom or something. Like there's a clear sort of yeah. I mean, it's that's what we're dealing with. I think here is the difficulty with terms. There's the one sense that we want to understand things clearly and simply in the way that most of us, I think, kind of already know. And then there's the terminology, the academic terminology, when we're speaking about big subjects like what is art and what is beauty and all these kinds of things. We're really getting it, we're dabbling in a much deeper water there. And it's difficult to speak about those things correctly in terms of what a philosophy professor might, how two philosophy professors might speak to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can really take on those tough subjects like what is truth and and sometimes still come to big, massive disagreements. And my interest is kind of the fork in the road, is where you have something that actually can't be proven just through intellectual rigor. As to say, I've thought about something for a really long time, and therefore I know a lot about it. And if I get a chance to speak to this lay person, I can prove them wrong and say, like, the kind of art that I like is the best because this, and this. I think a lot of people like you and I, being that we work in a representational, realistic kind of a way, we already know, like, we already have a pretty clear sense of how we feel about a lot of these things. And so I guess in some ways I'm interested in defining it by what it is not as well. And also countering the capital A art world that has tried to put a lot of this kind of work down or take it out of the spotlight for a long time now, many decades.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in that, quotes again, fight, as you might, a little battle there in some ways. Sort out some terminology and disagreements within the realist art world, but also to come together and sort of say, like, this work deserves more attention than some of the artwork that dominates the larger public exhibition museum spaces now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I certainly agree that it does deserve a lot more credit than it does, and I think lots of the things that are referred to as art and both as art and as beautiful are just not either one of those things. So okay. So let's try then to help ourselves here by trying to discuss art first. Or like the meaning, the definition and the meaning of the term. So I'm gonna look at the Instagram thread where you wrote things, okay, to reference from there. And here, is it okay if I read? I mean, like, directly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh yeah, please do.
Just a minute, please. Okay, you said that there's a quote. I guess you don't remember who said it, but it said, quote, "Art is a tool, a method of externalizing the internal, giving us a sense of control over the uncontrollable," end quote. So do you still not remember who said that, or where you got that quote from, and why is it? So like, explain the quote to me.
I still don't remember who said it. I think I wrote it down while I was listening to something, while I was painting. Like, most of the hours that I end up listening to things are while I'm painting, and I stop painting for a minute and put something on pause and then write down an interesting quote like that. Honestly, I think we're always in flux, right? So remember which pre-Socratic philosopher was coined that idea that everything is always in flux, and you really can't nail anything down perfectly. So maybe one day I would think that's my favorite definition of art, and on another day, or even a different part of the same day, I might start to feel a little bit differently or want to expand on it. I'm definitely not set. I'm not set in my opinions and things. I've always been trying to prove myself wrong since the beginning of my career, and test things, and like, why do I want to paint this way? Am I crazy? Why am I spending so much time sitting in front of a board, moving pigment around? There's got to be something more to it. There's got to be a reason. So it's been like a 14-year journey now, where I've been trying to look into what the world people, who I think are often stereotyped as being the intellectual, the smart people, black turtlenecks, sometimes I like to think of them, wearing glasses like I am,
right.
Kind of like walking into a room and in contemplation, rather than with the sort of instant emotional reaction, sort of like, I don't understand this, therefore I think it's probably brilliant, rather than just being like, wow, that's amazing. Look at that sculpture. That's, rendered incredibly. So I think that that's kind of where I've been coming from. I've always wondered why those people think the way that they do. What have they learned in art school that I didn't learn? And is it all just a big farce? And the conclusion that I've come up with so far over this number of years is that it is.
Mhm.
But I may be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong, and I'm happy to change my definitions of anything that I've ever put out there. Um,
That art is a farce?
no, sorry. The quote that we were talking about, art as a
Ah,
tool, a method of externalizing the internal, giving us the sense of control over the uncontrollable.
uh-huh.
Um, I think that sounds quite nice to me in many ways. It could be expanded on, of course. But I'm happy to be proven wrong at any point, or to be changed, or to be convinced otherwise. Not just with art, but with everything, with every position. So I kind of feel like I'm always testing myself.
Okay. Okay, so I guess then the question would be, why does this quote currently lure you to it? And what does it mean?
Well, I think starting from the beginning of it, art as a tool, the term tool can be, it's so broad. So that easily encapsulates what art is, I think, in many ways. And a tool can be used for destruction, or it can be used to build something constructive. So I don't think that that would be wrong necessarily, that it can be thought of as a tool. But every single, thinking philosophically now, just to be a pester, as some philosophers do, we're questioning everything all the time, right? Like, so we're like,
Sure.
well, art is a tool. Can I even just take those first four words and stop there and kind of like hyper analyze how that might not be right? Right? The same thing happens on Threads by Instagram. I don't know if you're familiar with Threads on Instagram.
No.
It's like the Twitter of Instagram, basically.
Right.
So I've posted a thought on there probably half a dozen times, and I think almost every time I'm disappointed because people take things out of context right away, and they kind of just give you an answer assuming that, I don't know, assuming that you are what they project, or you're a
Mm-hmm.
person, they don't really know the background of what you're talking about. So it's like, okay, in order to really explain myself, I need much more than 140 characters or whatever they give you. So then there's almost no point. I just basically stop posting there unless it's something really mundane that is very difficult to take out of context. So philosophically speaking, yes, we could, like, it's really easy to go into the weeds and deconstruct everything and say, like, art is a tool. Is that even true? Does that even make sense? But I like it. It feels good. And then moving on, a method of externalizing the internal. I think it sounds good. And I think we all I want to sound smart. So yeah, externalizing the internal. I think that there's obviously, what is existence? What is this whole thing that what is this body that are we souls trapped in a body? Uh, what's happening inside of us? We may never know until we're gone, and then we find out all of the big answers that we've all been kind of looking for and just barely scratching the surface on in our mortal human existence. But that feels good to me. So a method of externalizing the internal, giving us a sense of control over the uncontrollable. I think that starts to address our desire to simplify complex things
Mm-hmm.
so that we can grasp it with our human minds, which are obviously very limited compared to what everything that's happening, right? So I think it's necessary for us to look at the things that we're not yet comfortable with, and that's why I even think, say, going with beauty, the colloquial sense of what that could mean is also what I think others think it means, or what I think it means right now, and what it can mean moving forward. So that there's some sense of lack of control even within it, like that there's a tiny aspect of a definition that has uh, something negative almost to kind of give the positive side of the definition, the feel-good part of the definition, that little glimpse of a counter argument. So even to say at the end of that quote, giving us a sense of control over the uncontrollable, I think addresses our human condition. That we're just, oftentimes we feel like we really don't have as much control over our lives and over what we want out of our art as much as we would want.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm leaving everything really wide open here too. Like, I know I'm speaking vaguely about these things and it's difficult to pin them down.
So when this quote says art is a tool, do you think it's referring to the finished work of art itself, or is it referring to the act of making the work of art as the tool? So it's like, is the work of art the tool, or is the act, like the process by which you produce a painting, the tool? Because
I think it would have to be both. It could be
okay.
both.
It could be both, or is it both?
That's a good question. I think it is both, inevitably, because art is something that obviously a lot of us are compelled to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so the act of making art is in a sense a tool for our soul to express itself or express what it's feeling in a way that is in that particular form, which is usually a visual representation of something or a three-dimensional representational something, instead of as an author would use writing and a musician would use audio. We are using this tool in a necessary way that if we don't, there's something about the lack of doing such a thing that would render us more depressed and hating life in general. So it's that kind of like the Nietzsche quote where he says, without music, life would be a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's exactly the same with the visual art. I mean, it just feels like we need it. So it is a tool for artists to then, like you could say, comparing it to a hammer, I can build a house, and the carpenter is using the hammer as a tool to build a house, which then someone could live in. So then to say, is the house the tool? You could say a house is a tool for shelter, but that's kind of weird. So I would stop the definition there. Art is but yeah, you're making me think about this on the spot right now. Think like, I thought about this quote for about 30 seconds when I wrote it down initially.
Mm-hmm.
It felt good to me. And when we examine every part of it, then just go deeper and deeper into the weeds. What does it really mean?
Right.
But art itself, I think, can be a tool or a vehicle of feeling, be another way to put it, to communicate something to other human beings that we cannot communicate through any other means. So if a visual artist is not a musician, they're not going to use an instrument to communicate something to people. They're going to use visual art because that's their tool. And then the art itself could be thought of as a tool as well. Maybe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, because what I understand is that the act of making the work of art is so the process by which one makes the work. So I mean, when I mean the process, it's like, oh, you sit down at your desk and then you start making a drawing with a pencil, moving your hand around over the piece of paper. And so that is the method of externalizing the internal. You have a mental image, you have whatever it is that you can see in your mind's eye, and you want to see it on your piece of paper. You're trying to depict this whole thing, and you want the images to be accurately represented, and you want the composition of the thing to be well composed, and then to have a final correct looking image. So it's a method of externalizing the internal, but then that is the act of making the work of art, giving us a sense of control over the uncontrollable. I think that also refers to the act of making the work of art, because as Dr. Jordan Peterson, who is a Canadian, would say, one of the few times that he talked about art, and I really wish he would do it way more often than he does, he says that artists go into the unknown and civilize it. So, meaning that, we try to bring some kind of order to something that to chaos itself. And I mean, that's also what we're trying to do when we're trying to figure out an image on the picture plane. So what I understand from the quote is that it's referring to the act of making the work of art rather than the finished image itself. So then I guess there would still be, what do you think? I mean, so first of all, what do you think about those two things? Like
I agree with you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think that I would probably expand the definition as well to say that there's another element that, I mean, it could be 10 times longer.
Sure.
Honestly, but to keep it brief, I think that it probably does reflect the act of making art more so than art. The finished product of art in and itself is the tool, and then the rest of the quote I think is referring to the act of making, the method of externalizing, the action. So yeah, I agree with that completely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so in that case, we would still have to then talk about art itself, and in that case, tell me what you think about this. So this is the definition by another artist that has already been on the podcast. He published a book recently, and he has a surprisingly short definition of art in his book. It's, quote, "Art is a visually creative depiction of an idea and or emotion," end quote. So this is Robert Florzak. He's been on the podcast a couple of times now, and that is his definition of art. And I think that this part is specifically referring to the object, like the finished object of art. The painting, the drawing, the sculpture. So what do you think about that? Now, what do you think about this definition? Art is the visually creative depiction of an idea and or emotion.
I would agree. But then we come into the place, I think, where artists like yourself and I, or anyone else that might be watching this podcast, is interested in representational, realistic art. I know there's all sorts of people out there who are going to have different opinions and terms. But I think the interesting part about that whole question, of course, is when we get into the areas that I don't want to see defined as art, like some of the postmodern influenced art that has happened over the past few decades or so. Because as soon as we start to define it in a way that sounds good on paper, and it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then we could say, well, why can't literally everything be art? Because it feels good. I think it feels good, and it tends to those humans that want to be kind of tending towards comfort at all moments of their life will always just say, yeah, that's good, that's great, everything is included and everything's fine, everyone's welcome here, everything is just dandy. And if someone wants to spend 1,000 hours and tens of thousands of hours previous to that artwork to learn about anatomy and light and paint handling and mediums and put that in an exhibition, and then the work beside it is literal vomit paintings or human excrement or something like that, and say like, well, why isn't this equal? I think what we're really dealing with here is a lot of us that have that sort of preconceived feeling that there's something very different there, and
Right.
we can't put those two things on the same plane. So, preaching to the choir, as I said, I'm sure a lot of people that might be listening to this already feel that way generally. So
Yeah.
I agree, it's probably important to have a definition that excludes that. Like, why can't murder be art if like someone says, well, that's my passion.
Right.
the way that I am a serial killer, like that's my art. Like, obviously, pretty much everyone, even the art world people, probably agree that that can happen. And
Um.
so,
Yes. Yeah. I when you were talking a little while ago about how like the definition of this, well, what we're talking about right now, art can be expanded upon. It's like it's actually like no. I feel like it actually rather needs a lot of polishing. And that's why I really polishing, meaning like shaving down the parts that obviously do not belong there, because no, because it doesn't make sense to me that everything is art, because that just makes no sense. And just like you were saying just now with the example of the painting versus in a show, and then next to it has just like a brick on a pedestal, like for the same price, or like the brick is like more expensive than the drawing that was lovingly made. That really makes no sense. um
hmm,
so then I would actually say, and then I wonder what you think, um that instead of trying to kind of elaborate on what it is, it's like it seems like it rather needs to have things shaved off, because so very many things usurp the term art and call themselves art, and other people refer to this or that as art. And it's like, really, it's like performance is not art. It's really shitty acting. You should try to be an actor and then be a good actor. And
hmm,
that's not an installation, that is interior decoration, and you should try actually interior decorating in a way that makes sense, instead of just filling a room with trash or something. So
hmm.
what do you think about that?
I agree. I think the problem is that when it comes down to it, there are certain people that are actually going to take any word. Like, that's why we can't pin this down. I know Jordan Peterson, for example, has probably said something about this in the past, where it's like the postmodern neo-Marxists, and like something
That's
like
good.
that about.
That's
That's my
really good.
terrible impression, by the way. Yeah.
No, that it sounds really good, but keep going.
just because I was born in a geographically probably about an hour and a half away from where he was born doesn't mean I can do his voice well. Um, but the definitions keep changing. So you can't even use certain words because people that are bitter and resentful about reality will say, like, okay, you have this definition that works. It's like you feel that it's ironclad and this definition is extremely solid. And all of a sudden a year later, like, well, you're not allowed to use that word anymore because it's offensive to certain people or something, and we're going
Hmm.
to use this other word now. So even if we do come up with a definition that excludes what I would think is just total garbage, and I'm sure a lot of others would agree, then it still doesn't really mean anything, because the real battlefront is language in and of itself anyway. So like the words are going to, it's like, yeah, we've defined the rules of this game, we can play it, and now we've won. And they're going to say no, because actually the rules of the game are not that way at all. So really, like Stephen Hicks would say, I know he's an intellectual that Jordan Peterson has even recommended reading and listening to. Uh, he's saying that a lot of the uh, people that would kind of have created this postmodern art world are really just at the root of their motivation, bitter and resentful about not being able to win a game that was established based on reality and the way that we define things. In the same way we define beauty by its aesthetic function, and also its harmony and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, if a person can't play that game, maybe they just can't draw, right? Like, I'm sure you've met somebody like that before, that just, like, they've tried and they've tried and they've tried and they cannot draw very well. And so they might be jealous or bitter or angry at people that can. And they look at that person who has incredible hand-eye coordination and can do a photorealistic airbrush painting of a bikini babe with a Budweiser like, and they go like, all these other people are out there like, wow, that's incredible. Like the non-art people in the world, right? The majority of everyone else is like, wow, that's incredible, that's incredible, that's incredible art, because look at how realistic it is. And then us art people are like, oh my goodness, like facepalm, because obviously there's something that needs to be explained there. And so we have this like world, that's this new game that's created by people that can't play that game, so to speak. Um, if you can't win a game, then you just make a new game with new rules. So that's the game that we're trapped in trying to define things within a broad term, because not everyone will accept it no matter what. It's always going to be accepted within our community of people that already have this innate feeling of what beauty is and what art is and what is valuable, what we should keep from the past, what we can experiment with going forward, instead of some of the more postmodern influenced academic people that would say like throw out the past completely, it's all garbage.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Well,
originality is,
I think that you might be wrong about the so-called lay people, because they're the ones that are saying, "Oh, my 5-year-old can do that,"
that
or
too.
"I can do that."
Yes, you're
So
right.
then there's also that. I think, I mean, I agree with you about the struggle of people wanting to use words for whatever is convenient for them in the moment. But
Mhm.
that isn't how language, you know, words do change meaning, but they change meaning naturally. Their meaning is not changed by force. Meaning that somebody artificially can change the meaning of a word and be like, now this is going to be a clock. And then, for example, and then kind of they like force this by
Mhm.
using the word and then kind of forcing it on other people. And then it's like, yeah, you can get some people to play along with you, but it's not really, it's like because that's not how a word's meaning changes,
Mhm.
you're not gonna get that into the dictionary, um
Exactly.
which is great. And it really makes me, so then in that case, like, I agree that it's difficult to try to congeal the definition of both art and beauty again, because it's been diluted so much. They have both been diluted so much, or like in the case of beauty, it has been kind of scorned so much. But I think that by example, and just like, again, with the help of the so-called lay people, because it's almost like an instinct thing in that case. Like, it isn't like art or beauty, I don't think are like some high-minded academy sort of thing necessarily. I think both are
Mhm.
very natural in the wiring, our biology, our wiring, that it's like, yeah, somebody that has never made a work of art can see something and be like, my 5-year-old can do that, or I can do that. And it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, follow that
I agree.
instinct, you know? So then let's talk maybe then about the more, arguably the more squirrely one. And let's um, talk a little bit about beauty now. Um, because, yeah, when I have people on the podcast, and I kind of, I'm like, hey, do you want to be on the podcast? So I want to try to talk about these two things. And it's like, it's usually like, oh, that is so complicated, or that is so, it's like, or, oh, that is such a broad definition, kind of like we were complaining, or like I was complaining just now. And it's like, um, that people will almost feel or act like afraid of having the responsibility of trying to define a term, or trying to think what it means to what they understand, rather not for them to ascribe a definition to the term, but rather to try to think what they understand about. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Um yeah, okay, so let's, I'm gonna go again to the Instagram thread, and I'm gonna read from what you wrote here. So just a
Good.
second.
I need the reminder.
um Okay, so it says here, quote, that you would defer to a standard Aristotelian definition, more or less, that beautiful is the word we use to describe anything which matches our criteria for balance between multiple factors. These factors are usually exemplified through visual ratios, like the golden ratio, scale, proportion, symmetry, and function, etc. End quote. So, what does that mean? Please elaborate.
Good question. Good question. I think the very first part of it, what was that again? The very first sentence?
The beautiful is the word we use to describe anything which matches our criteria for balance between multiple factors.
Okay. No, that makes sense. I feel there is this idea of universalism,
Mm-hmm.
which can often fall into cliche. Are you familiar with neuroaesthetics? It's a new study of, well, apparently a new study of neuroscience study, how our brains respond to meaning through experiments.
Okay. I don't know of it.
Okay. It's not something I know a lot about, really, honestly, but there were tests, they'll do tests with colors, for example, and just like show a bunch of different colors and then gauge people's responses. And the people that they did experiments on were not artists because they didn't want them to have a bias, like a preconceived bias or like a trained bias to see a certain color in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And they found that, yeah, there were definitely predictable reactions for certain colors. Red would make people kind of anxious and increase their pulse in some way or something. So it seems like something like that is fairly conclusive. It's like a lot of these academic studies, I think, in many ways are just confirming the obvious in terms of what we already feel. And like Plato's tripartite soul, I think it really is feeling first, like with everything, like politics and all of this stuff, which I don't want to get into, but it's like we feel a certain way about something, and then we look for terms and support material that can bolster our feeling and say, like, I think that there's not a lot of humans that are completely neutral about everything, and they're just like, I'm going to look at the reason that has been laid out as to why this position is better than the other, or this is right or wrong, and then go from that. I don't think that's the case. I really do think it's the base emotions and the spirit and the heart that is the two parts of Plato's tripartite soul that are guiding our tastes, and a lot of us that are making realistic work already feel the way we feel, and so we're going to enjoy reading quotes that support our feeling that we've already had for a while. So the argument is that if there is a universal reaction to things, proving that the sort of interpretation of what a person's sense of beauty is universal, the argument against that is that they'll say, well, like in other cultures, some colors mean different things, and then so therefore things aren't universal. But I honestly think that's a cop-out. Again, I think there's just like, they could have done so many more studies, and I'm sure that there are other studies that have been done. But even just like pure function, for example, if you have 3 spoons in front of you before you sit down to eat a meal, and each spoon is fairly similar in size, so any one of them could work, but they're slightly different, right? We are going to choose. This is the reality part that I think a lot of the art world people don't like to accept, maybe, and hopefully that's controversial and somebody watching this wants to poke at me or something, and that's fine. But we're going to choose the spoon that seems to have the best function based on the material, based on the shape. Maybe one of them is a little bit more shallow and wouldn't hold as much soup in it, and the other one looks brittle, like it could break, and the other one looks like it's made out of some lead material that could be toxic, right? We're going to analyze these things, and everyone across the board when it comes to these base survival interpretations of the world. So we're going to have somebody that likes, the crazy was going to say like, yes, that person can do that crazy, absurd, grotesque thing, and they're a brilliant artist, and this other person here can do this classically inspired art, and I don't like that because it's in the past and we're beyond that now. And even that person I'm describing is still going to probably choose the spoon that will facilitate their eating of what's in the bowl. So I do think that if you did all these, it's probably just so obvious to everybody, it's not worth doing experiments. We have this sense of what is beautiful in terms of um, just know it. I honestly think you just know it. I've been around artists. I've been in shared studio spaces where someone makes like really messy, grotesque, kind of provocative, shocking artwork,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that like when they're looking at something that they couldn't do, they're almost like training themselves to just not look at it and almost not acknowledge that it exists within their space. And that's part of the trained eye that I think has been kind of like a brainwashing that has happened in a lot of the uh, conceptually based art schools over the past number of decades. What I think that they've been based on is training people, young, malleable minds, how to see something that is actually very subjective in many ways, and to see it in a certain way. Like another example would be a color. I think if you had a very enticing speaker, you give that person an hour to talk to a bunch of young malleable minds about how blue is the best, it's just the best, like blue, blue, blue is the best, and give all these reasons and all these slides, you're going to have all those kids coming out of that lecture seeing blue things, just like, oh yeah, that's it, yeah. And then they see somebody with a red shirt and they're like, oh, that person, oh god, oh, get away from me. Right? Like I really do think that's, and you could do the same thing with the other color. We're just like, when people focus on a certain uh, aspect of thought for a long period of time, we kind of get trained into that mindset as to why it is. But there's so much subjectivity left there. Some things are completely subjective. They don't really matter. They're arbitrary. And when it comes to beauty, I think there is a relation to function. There's a relation to how a person that we think is attractive is probably also healthy, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can't take those things apart.
Okay, so then you're saying, so what I think I'm understanding is that there's something in the, so that beauty tells the viewer that something is functional, kind
Well,
of.
even if it's just a picture, if it's a two-dimensional picture
Mm-hmm.
of of my choice of which spoons do I would say more beautiful, I think the term is also, for pragmatic reasons, I think it's conversation is again getting into the philosophical weeds of terminology and semantics, which I'm not uh, capable of dealing with properly. Um, as an artist, I would say, we have that sort of pragmatic sense of the layperson who is saying that, my kid could do that, and I agree. It's some lay people. I can't just generalize everybody into one category, but it is credit to a lot of regular people who work jobs that keep society going, that will have higher standards in terms of realism than most art world people would. So to keep it simple, in colloquial terms, I would say that this topic of what beauty is something most of us just kind of already know. We have a sense of what it means to us, and that reason I would actually say that I wouldn't even use the term to describe other things, but because I do think beauty has that sense of like an attractive person, or a flower, or a picture of some gorgeous light on a waterfall. There's this idea of the sort of the height of aesthetic experience in terms of that it has no practical function as well. So when it comes to what I said before with practical function, to me, I guess now I'm getting into the weeds because I'm saying to me, right? I don't believe in personal definitions of these things necessarily, but there is that marriage of function with aesthetic pleasure, like a ship, the old ships, the Carrack ships and the galleons. I don't use one of those ships. They serve no function to me. They're way before my time, yet I still appreciate them because I think they look incredible. They also look incredible. The design is based on necessity, out of like what worked to actually make the ship functional.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that knowledge, that bit of knowledge that comes into what it is first, that also helps it to seem like it's beautiful. Maybe I'm just going further down into different difficult weeds. I may have been wiser just to deflect the question into something simpler.
Well, it's just that I was reminded a little bit of Roger Scruton because and I don't remember which one of his lectures he talks about because it was like from I don't know who, but it was one of those modernist type people. I mean, like last 100 years or something, very recent. That I think it was an architect. I don't know who it was, but he said that form follows function, and then that's why you have. That's kind of so that refers to like those ugly, super ugly buildings are just a box. The houses and buildings are just a box. But then in one of his lectures, Roger Scruton, and he himself talks a lot about architecture as well. It's kind of what he focuses on in terms of aesthetics and beauty and that kind of stuff. He says, no, it's actually the other way around, which I think is really interesting because it's really interesting and it's kind of difficult to try to, or it's difficult for me at least to try to see why it is, perhaps is that way. Because, for example, if you look at the human body, and you look like at one of those like the doctor charts, the charts like with all the muscles and with like the guy that's like that with all the muscles, or any anatomy drawing of this basically the same thing. That is something like that, kind of. It's kind of over millions of years, it's responsive to the needs of humans, the things that we have needed across time. And it has the shape and the functions and the things of the body, of whatever the body does, is in response to those things that have generally worked best for our survival, that have helped us to be alive for the longest and to be strong and all of this stuff. And it's somehow the result of that is amazing. It's an admirable, beautiful collection of shapes to look at. And there's Roger Scruton also says something regarding architecture and building stuff that, in relationship to beauty, that it's like the buildings that are ugly and that are boxes, they either get demolished or they get abandoned and nobody wants to be there. They just get vandalized and the window's broken because it's just a shithole. But the buildings that are beautiful and made with care and to be in harmony with their surroundings, we want to preserve them because of their beauty. And so like in Europe, I mean, of course, Europe, lots of cities have just these amazing buildings and everything, and they're still there, and they still move all the visitors that go to see these edifications, and a lot of times they get repurposed. Old buildings get used into make it into a bar, make it into a restaurant or whatever, but the building continues to be used. So there's something about among the many other things that are important about beauty is that it makes you want to take care or to preserve something, which is the object or the person or whatever it is that is beautiful. We want to preserve that, right? So then that's why we have all the many things that have been preserved. And if you go to the museum, like those really old objects, the little adornments, the little decorations or whatever of the Victorian Versailles type houses, like the really ornate looking ones, it's like those things are precious and amazing. And it's crazy that humans made that, and we want to preserve it because they were made like so lovingly. I think I'm kind of rambling a little bit. But I was trying to talk about form versus function, I guess. And which one came first, like the chicken or the egg, kind of.
Maybe both at the same time. Yeah, another way to put it, I guess, would be even just boiling down the aesthetics visually to composition. Saying like a great painting composition is similar to great structure architecturally, because it has this certain type of balance to it, and it feels like it works. It guides the eye through the composition, and it has a focal point, and it has a secondary focal point, and so on. And the colors work, and the values work, and there are a lot of art fundamentals within a composition like that, like overlapping forms, right? Like two circles that kind of overlap are often going to be more pleasing, artistically speaking, in an artistic sense, to look at, even as an abstraction, just literally drawing two circles. Whereas if I want to display two circles, like two apples, in a design sense, like a blueprint, or as a didactic kind of explanation, or sale, like if I want to sell something in a grocery store, if I have two apples pictured, maybe they're shown clearly so that you can see both of them very well. But in an artistic sense, I might take those apples and overlap them and have them lit with Rembrandt lighting, and used to have really dark shadows on one side, and they look kind of dramatic because of that, and they look more three-dimensional because of that. There's a bright highlight, and that's not useful in the grocery store, because the person wants to see the picture of the apple in full exposed light. They can see the dots, and whether or not it's green and red, and if they use Rembrandt lighting on those apples, you're hiding something in mystery. A third of the apple might be in dark shadow, and you don't even get to see all of it. So there's that simplification, I think, of a lot of those things in terms of why people would look at a painting and feel like it is pleasing to look at. I think it's the same thing. It's overlapping forms. It's a lot of two circles often please a lot of stereotypical males, right? And it's just two circles. And looking at a Peter Paul Rubens composition with the big horse's rear end, and then you have like a character that's slightly intersecting that shape, doing something, and then they're looking at something that's the focal point, which is the person riding the horse, and that person riding the horse happens to be roughly on the third top and from the side, and the magic square of the composition, and all this kind of stuff, and the golden ratio. For that reason, though, I would turn this whole conversation on its head and say, maybe I don't know that I want to live in a world where everyone is doing that and following those rules specifically, because in an artistic sense, in some ways, selfishly, I would say, if everyone's doing that, then I feel like my purpose has diminished somewhat. Whereas when I started painting and drawing seriously and dedicating myself to it as a career, it really felt like everything was the opposite. There was just like very scribbly, childish artwork was dominant, and in Canada, that's the only artwork that would get grant funding. It was like extremely minimal and like a Cy Twombly type of work. So coming from that, even say going back to, I think it was Heraclitus who brought up the term the unity of opposites. So in some way, I think like if we have this like dichotomy of like very skill-based work, and that represents the skilled adult, and then we have the inner child that is totally free and is not afraid to just scribble over everything. We have the unity of those things, and to me, that is what, in some ways, some academic trained art like atelier type work can lack, and that it doesn't have enough of the infinite child that is also creatively unlimited and unhinged. But too much of one or the other goes off the rails for me, and I feel like, especially in the direction of the uncontrolled child who has no knowledge of composition and all of the fundamental art, overlapping forms, and all of these different rules about aesthetics in terms of what looks good. But I think when we build a building, it definitely has to work. It has to make sense, and the actual structure of that building has to fill the form, the function, and then the aesthetics of the building, and how some things that are somewhat arbitrary that don't detract from the structural integrity of the building can also be played with and exaggerated, or if that, I'm not sure if that makes any sense. Again, I'm rambling over.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. But I think I disagree about what you said about not having everybody do what Rubens does, because in the sense that there being a lot of rules, sort of, I guess, is what I'm kind of understanding from that. Because, I mean, if you look at the work that was produced during, I mean, really from when we started using the oil paint, which is oil paint, which was around from around like the Renaissance, and then if you go after that up until like the French Salon, the Royal Academy, I mean, there were plenty of rules in place, and there's like plenty of variability of work, like even when it got like really tight, or arguably when it got really tight in terms of rules, like around the salons, the French Salon, and there was magnificent work being produced there. I mean, it's really not a problem. So I think and there was no permission, I guess, in a way of not no permission. It just wasn't readily accepted like now of the so-called Cy Twombly type stuff, where it's just like you're just not making anything. You're not making anything in particular. So yeah. Okay, so listen, we have broken the hour-long mark of the conversation here. So I would like to know, I'm going to start to close it out. And I would like it if you told our listeners and viewers, now that we're going to close it out, what are you up to lately? What projects do you have coming up? Is there anything at all that you want to plug? Where can people find your work? This sort of thing.
You can find my work if you go online and just look for my name. My website is stevechmilar.com, so that's STEVE, as you would expect, all in one word. Then my last name is spelled CHMILAR. And you will also find me under the same name on Instagram and on YouTube. And I have big plans. I feel like as you probably know, this career requires us to wear many hats. So this is a new era for me where I'm trying to focus on one of those hats more, which is really just finishing my best work in paintings. I feel like I've been making a lot of smaller work and drawings, and then also teaching a little too much in some ways. I like it, I enjoy it, but it's amazing how even one day a week became almost too much sometimes. And then weekend workshops that I was doing as well, like on average of once a month. So I'm teaching a bit less, but that being said, I may do a workshop in Florence, actually, upcoming next year in the spring. So if you're interested in that, let me know. You can just give me a message on any one of my social media platforms. And that's all I could say about that now, because it's really unofficial. But
Oh,
it would be like a full like week-long workshop where I'm diving as deep as possible into my process and how I work the way that I do. And in terms of the artwork itself, I'm just always looking to go deeper with what I've already done and improve on it and continue to grow and make more large multi-figured narrative paintings, which take a ridiculous amount of time.
okay. Well, good stuff always does. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so that sounds great, and I will put all the pertinent links in the video description for anybody who is interested. If you want to support Steve or the podcast or my work or all of those three together, please go ahead and visit those links. Thanks to everyone for listening to the podcast, and see you next time.
Thank you.